Joined by ESPN Insider Jeremy Fowler this morning with lots to discuss in the Titans head coach search here on Ramon Kayla and Will. Good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good to see you
Morning.
or hear from you.
You too, Jeremy.
You as well. Appreciate you taking the time. I know this is obviously a very busy time. Wanted to start with the piece ESPN Plus and your colleague Dan Graziano writing about Aaron Glenn as a name to watch for the Titans search. What are you hearing about him, and how strong of a candidate do you think he is for the Titans opening right now?
Well, I've heard his name a little bit. You know, two names I've heard. It's very early, so I want to couch that. But like two names I've heard that will be intriguing are Aaron Glenn and Bobby Slowik, the Houston OC. Slowik having an offense that would be easily transferable for Will Levis from what he did at Kentucky. And, the Titans ownership has a base in Houston, so they've seen firsthand what the Texans offense has been doing. And then the 49ers connection with Slowik and GM Ran Carthon. So, those things are make Slowik one to watch. And then Aaron Glenn, I think that's a byproduct of the Titans looking for a culture builder. They want somebody who's going to be energetic and have a good, healthy culture to foster and work collaboratively with Carthon. So that's where Glenn comes in.
ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, our guest. And Jeremy, specifically with Bobby Slowik, what is the opinion of him around the league and just the risk involved with hiring a coordinator after one big year? How are teams approaching him as one of the most coveted candidates in this cycle?
Well, with a little bit of caution, but that also acknowledging that he's been impressive, how he's schemed up some clean looks for C.J. Stroud really all year, and they've produced despite injuries all over the field and all over the offensive line, wide receiver. They've dealt with a lot. Here they are in the second round of the playoffs. So certainly his body of work in 1 year has been impressive, but he's very young. He looks young. His experience says he's young in the game. And so those are factors that teams will have to weigh. It's interesting, right? Because sometimes you want to get on a hot coach a year early, because then next year it's going to be even harder to get him. You look at Ben Johnson, right? Last year he took his name out of the running for some jobs, and now this year he's going to be a top guy who will probably have multiple options. So if you think Bobby Slowik is going to be that next year, then maybe you just get him this year and try to get ahead of the pack. But that does come with a risk, with a lack of experience too.
Jeremy Fowler is with us this morning. Jeremy, I have to ask you, man, real quick as we revisit, does Vrabel's shortcomings as a head coach, will it work in other places too? Or were you just as shocked as everybody else when he was let go? Because did you think there were many shortcomings that he had?
Yeah, Ramon, that one's tough and probably pretty layered, because I guess it depends on what you're looking for from a head coaching perspective. If you're looking for a leader who's always going to have a tough team that plays hard for you and can win in big games, he's certainly pretty high on your list. And at the same time, there were at least echoes of two different general managers having a hard time working with him. Whether that's fair or not, or true or not, that was sort of out there. And, actually, I from what I heard, his dynamic with Ran Carthon was not bad. Like they had a pretty good relationship. It was probably just a matter of having some different visions. And this is a team that clearly needs to rebuild. So I don't know how much Vrabel wanted to be a part of that, even though he said he wanted to be back. That's a tough thing to do. So there are probably some philosophical differences at some point. But he's a proven commodity. It just depends on whether teams feel like that culture building part and collaborating with the GM, is that going to be an issue with Vrabel? I don't think so. I think he's adaptable. So, certainly he'll get some looks. I mean, I still think Washington could talk to him. I haven't heard anything concrete on that, but it wouldn't surprise me if they looked at least one of those proven guys out there, whether it's Harbaugh, Belichick, or Vrabel. And it seems like there's not much team for Belichick in Washington. So Vrabel makes sense there as an interview candidate. And look, if Dallas opens up, that would make a lot of sense for Vrabel too.
So when you look at that, you're speaking about being a great teammate to the people in the front office and your scouts and stuff like that. As a head coach, how many do you know of or seek out what seemed to have been the breakdown here. Total control of roster and draft picks is what Vrabel wanted. Do you see that as something that's common for coaches wanting across the NFL? Roster control, draft control, and just everything moves through them?
Well, that is an issue for sure, especially with established head coaches that have done it before. But there's a good balance to be had. There are a lot of different ways to be successful in the NFL. There's certainly a lot of GM and head coach pairings that have had success with a 50-50 share, or the head coach being okay with the GM making those calls, final say over the roster. You look at John Schneider in Seattle. He now has final say over the roster where he really didn't before. That was Pete Carroll's. But it worked for a long time between the two, and they had a great relationship based on all experiences and intel. So there are a lot of different ways to do it. But, yes, I think especially for the proven guys, Jim Harbaugh, he's going to want some level of control. I don't know if it's full control. I think he's open-minded to a young general manager and working with somebody new. But he's going to need to have a major say in picking players. Belichick, same thing. If he goes to Atlanta, he might have a better chance of that than if he goes to, say, Dallas if that opens, where you have Jerry Jones do some of that. So it just depends on the guy. A lot of coaches are okay with that and just want to coach, and that formula can work really well too.
ESPN senior NFL reporter Jeremy Fowler joining us this morning on RK Dub. So, Jeremy, when it comes to some of these other offensive-minded guys that are out there, what do you think about a guy like Brian Callahan, who is not technically the play caller there in Cincinnati, but from all we've heard from sources, a great leader of men, a guy that does great in front of the room, and also has been around the game since he was pretty much a kid?
Yeah, Brian Callahan has a good experience. He is going to be one of the top offensive candidates after all this is said and done. It would not surprise me if he's in the mix for a few of these. Carolina comes to mind. If Carolina can't get Ben Johnson, who they targeted last year, then the belief league-wide is that they'll go offense. And he would make sense as a guy who has experience, who helped Joe Burrow get better. Jake Browning stepped in and looked not as good as Joe Burrow, but almost as good as a backup that nobody really knew anything about, and he played well. So that's a testament to Callahan. He's got a good demeanor, kind of the classic not too high, not too low demeanor. So I think the rigors of the job, he would handle that without major emotion.
When it comes to here in Tennessee, a lot of fans don't really want to see another defensive-minded guy, and you're hearing that right now with the kind of Aaron Glenn stuff that we've been talking about today. Do you see them going offense just because of what they've had in the past and maybe having a different type of vision with Amy Adams-Strunk?
Well, I do think going offense will be tempting, and that's why I thought of Slowik. I originally thought of Frank Smith, the Dolphins OC. I don't think they put in a request for him, but I thought he'd be a fit, coming from that Mike McDaniel tree, which Carthon's familiar with. And look, Brian Johnson's under heat in Philadelphia, but he could still be a head coaching candidate that the Titans are talking to. So I do believe it'll be tempting to go offense because of how anemic at times they've been on offense. You hate to say it. They've had their moments, certainly. But it just feels like whatever happens, a defensive guy is going to have to have a very detailed plan and a attractive OC to bring along with them to the job to sort of revamp things there now. Derrick Henry's a free agent. You can't just hand the ball over to him 30 times and expect to control the game anymore. I just don't know if that's their reality. It's really a time for them to sort of re-identify or reimagine what they want the offense to look like. You got Tajay Sharp, the running back that, maybe isn't a three-down guy, but he's probably going to be a bigger part of the plan moving forward. Getting some young receivers in there that can be staples and not just fill-ins. And do you build around Will Levis or not? I don't know that necessarily the coach has to be tied to him completely, but you probably have to be at least open-minded enough to know that in 2024 he's going to be taking snaps and he's got a lot of ability. So where do you go from there is going to have to be the plan. That's why I think offensive guys will probably have an advantage going in, but the defensive guy is going to have a detailed plan for how to handle the coordinator spot on offense.
He is ESPN Insider Jeremy Fowler at JFowlerESPN, where you find him on Twitter, bringing us inside info on the Titans head coach search. Jeremy, thank you as always for the time. We know it's a busy time, and we appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks everybody. Have a good day.
You too.
Absolutely. You too. There's Jeremy Fowler with us here this morning on the show. Bobby Slowik and Aaron Glenn, the two early names to watch. We'll react to that next.